Who were the Freedom Riders and why are they still relevant today? But before we dive in, if you believe that Black history is more than just 1 month, go ahead and subscribe and let's make sure that these stories keep getting told. What if I told you that a piece of civil rights history was nearly erased just last week? You see, on March the 7th, 2025, the Department of Government Efficiency, better known as DOGE, listed the historic Montgomery bus station, Freedom Riders Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, as a government-owned location targeted to be sold to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. But how did we get here? How do we go from honoring the sacrifices of those who fought for civil rights to nearly erasing their legacy? To understand why this matters, we need to go back to the beginning. Just who were the Freedom Riders? The Freedom Riders were a group of civil rights activists, both Black and white, who used nonviolent direct action to challenge segregation in bus terminals and on interstate buses. They rode into the segregated South, who was in defiance of the Supreme Court's ruling that segregation in interstate travel was unconstitutional. That ruling, made in 1946, should have been enough, but the South refused to comply, so the Freedom Riders took action. Between May and December of 1961, 436 Freedom Riders participated in at least 60 Freedom Rides. They faced brutal beatings, arrests, and even death threats. But their efforts forced the federal government to intervene and enforce desegregation laws. On Mother's Day, May 14, 1961, a Greyhound bus carrying Freedom Riders arrived at the Anniston, Alabama bus station, only to find the doors locked. Outside, an angry mob awaited. They slashed the tires and then firebombed the bus, all while the Freedom Riders were still inside. Now let's pause for a minute. Can you imagine the level of hatred, the kind of rage that would make someone set fire to a bus full of people just because they wanted to sit where they pleased? This attack, caught on national news, finally forced the federal government to take action. But the fight wasn't over. The original 13 Freedom Riders had started the journey, but by the time they reached Birmingham, Alabama, one of their buses had been burned, riders had been beaten, and no bus driver was willing to continue the trip. So what happened? A group of college students in Nashville, Tennessee, trained in nonviolence, picked up where the first group left off. They knew the risk. They knew that they could be beaten or worse, but they still went. Many told them to turn back, to wait, to choose a different way to fight for their rights. But they knew the time was now, and they were right. If you've made it this far, take a second to hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Did you learn about the Freedom Riders in school, or is this the first time you're hearing of these details? When preparing for this video, I watched a documentary that covered the Freedom Riders in depth. One voice that stood out to me was Dr. Ernest Rip Patton, a Freedom Rider himself. He spoke about the moment when he and his fellow students in Nashville, Tennessee decided to pick up the Freedom Rides after the original group had been attacked and forced to stop. They were just days away from their final exam. Anyone who has ever been to college knows just how intense these times are. But they knew if they did not act, that nothing would change. They put their education, their futures, even their lives on the line to continue the mission. Today, don't we hear similar arguments when we talk about injustice? Why are you talking about this now? I'm sick of hearing about it. This is too divisive. You just need to pray about it. Now is not the time. But history tells us that change never comes at a convenient time. When the Freedom Riders took action, it wasn't because it was easy. It was because it was necessary. A few years ago, my wife and I visited the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, which is located at the former Lorraine Hotel where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. There is a Freedom Rider exhibit, and while we were there, we noticed an elderly white woman sitting in complete silence, staring at the exhibit. She didn't move, she didn't speak, she just sat. My wife and I couldn't help but wonder, was she one of the Freedom Riders? Was she part of the angry mob? Or was she someone who witnessed history unfold firsthand? We'll never know. But what I do know is this: history still affects us today, and our silence or our action determines what happens next. That's why visiting civil rights museums is so important. If you haven't been in a while, go. Take your kids, take your grandkids, take your friends. We must remember what almost happened to the Freedom Riders Museum. When I first heard that those listed the Freedom Riders Museum for sale, I picked up the phone and I called the museum directly. I spoke with a staff member who shared some great news. After people rallied together and spread the word, the museum was removed from the list. But here's the thing: we can't get comfortable. If that museum was almost erased, what's next? This is why it is so important to know our history and to take action. Parents and grandparents, this is our moment. The Freedom Riders didn't wait for the right time to take action, and we can't either. If we don't teach the next generation about our history, who will? That's why I created the Unlocking Black History Workbook, a keepsake designed to ensure that these lessons don't disappear. And that's why I'm inviting you to join our private Facebook group, where we go deeper, share resources, and keep these conversations alive. And remember, if we don't teach them, no one will. I'll see you at the next video.